Hey guys, Stealth here. Today in Wargame we're going to show you that the Dutch are not to be trifled with. This map is ideal for the Dutch decks, as in short range combat the Dutch infantry is really good. In medium area engagements or medium range engagements they tend to do slightly less impressive work than a Dutch-German coalition deck, because they simply don't have all the different versions of the leopards. So in an area like this it would be more difficult. But Echo, Hotel and Foxtrot are ideal for operations where the Dutch can do very well. And for that reason Martijntje over here and Solomon's Tell have decided both to bring out their Dutch decks. And they are going to try and capture as much terrain in this conquest game. It's a 2v2 for 500 points. And if you can capture and keep a foothold in these zones quickly, then it will help you win the match, of course. Now, in the meantime, you have to keep an eye on your flanks here, because this is an area where you can either expect an incursion from further infantry units, potential helicopter rushes along the right flank and the left flank, although the left flank is more difficult to execute because Gulf is a potential spotting location. And of course you have the option to use amphibious transports to go across these rivers here and here to do attacks on the other side and try to capture these industrial areas. So let's see what they're starting off with. Martijntje over here is starting off with the YP408s, and of course, judging by their veterancy, we're looking at the Korps Mariniers, potentially the 95, and we have an IHawk Pip 2 for anti-air units, because a map like this is guaranteed to bring out napalm bombers. On the right flank we have Solomons, who's also going to be using the Dutch, as mentioned. He's decided to bring slightly less veteran troops. He has the YP408s as well, but as you can see, some of these guys only have 2 chevrons for veterancy. Now the Dutch also get the YPR 76525, which is the 25mm autocannon. Very nice tracked transport with a quite punchy gun. You can see them right here. Pretty fast. The gun really does good work against enemy transports as well as enemy infantry, provided you can keep them at range. And especially that last bit can be challenging in a sector like Echo, where you have a good opportunity to rush in, but then immediately get your transport wasted by a stray RPG that manages to get from one of these buildings, as the infantry can get very close to each other. So they're marking their zones. They want to attack here and defend this area. And I suppose Martijntje is going to take the other area. Potentially Hotel, Foxtrot. We'll see. Now they're up against Sparky Haze and Rip Norder. These guys are going to be using some of the newer decks or the newer coalitions. I believe that Sparky is using the Finnish coalition deck, and Rip Norder I'm not exactly sure. We're going to have to see as the game unfolds. So let's get started. Now, with a map like this, you always need to be paying attention to where your units spawn. And especially in Juliet, this can be quite nasty, because your units will spawn from this side of the river. And that means that they're going to have to travel all the way to either this bridge before they can cross, or continue towards the town. Now, we have Martijntje's Korps Mariniers as well as his reconnaissance infantry here, potentially the KCT, immediately taking a spearhead position here, making sure that enemy infantry does not get an opportunity to dig in. And in the meanwhile, his fast motorized transports are rushing in, holding off these guys as long as possible. And unfortunately, the UH-14s are not doing that well. You can see that they're taking a lot of anti-air hits, but not before they were able to drop off their transports or their cargo. And the KCT are immediately engaging the Yekeri over there, which are coming out in good numbers today. So far, a lot of losses here, both on red and blue. KCT fighting them off with the Uzi and the Fallow, and the Korps Mariniers fighting with the Fall and the Fallow as well, trying to get these units at bay as much as possible. Unfortunately, they have infantry transports that can help out, but fortunately aren't. The XA-195KT is armed with the Bushmaster 2. It's capable of putting quite a bit of damage out on enemy infantry. And the T-55M Mati is already being engaged by the KCT, but so far they haven't quite been able to do a lot of damage to it, whereas it can do quite a bit of damage against its KCT. Marines are still moving up through these buildings. I think they're trying to make their way here, trying to get a flanking position on this tank and wipe it out. And unfortunately, we have a pretty hefty airstrike, but it misses the Marines that were out in the open. And right now, there we go. That's the T-55 down. So what else is going on? Well, the middle, surprisingly quiet. There's really not that much going on, despite the fact that this is usually one of those areas that you see quite a bit of engagement in. Now at this point, Ripnorder comes in with no less than 3 Super Galebs, trying to put the whole town on fire. At this point, it's a little bit too late though. He is buying himself time to drop off his own infantry here. But the Dutch have taken up positions here, with the Vuurploeg providing fire support and already trying to kill off some of these transports here. Marines doing quite alright, and further Stoottroepen in the front lines here in order to deal with transports at short range with the AT-4. Right flank also being defended by KCTs, at least for current defenses. And we have Stoottroepen 95 on 2 separate occasions going to be taking up ambush positions here. The battle for this sector is still raging, but it seems that the Marines so far are winning this fight. These 15-man squads are just extremely hard to get rid of. They are very, very good at outputting damage very quickly, and not just against infantry but transports alike using the AT-4. AT-4 with a 20 rounds a minute rate of fire is capable of knocking down transports pretty damn fast. And they have 12 rounds of them, so they can take out quite a host of transports. And there's just not one group, but there are a whole host of groups here. Now, of course, Red at this point could be deciding not to pursue this sector, but they don't want to lose it. So instead, they keep going in with bombers, trying to do more damage on the Marines here. And this is going to get slightly more nasty than the previous bombing run, as at this point the Marines either have to keep moving and risk exposing themselves to further fire from the Commandosi, as well as the transports, or stay inside the building, which really wouldn't be a good idea. Next airstrike comes in, and this is another Su-7BM. Fortunately not a napalm one, but still, the Marines here and the KCT have taken significant losses and are no longer an effective fighting force. And further reinforcements keep coming in. You can see that the transports here are trying to do damage to the Marines here. Not so much getting any luck there, as these Marines are trying to wipe them out as quickly as possible, but getting stunned in the process. Fortunately, from the other side of the river, Settlements is able to use the Vuurploeg to do damage to these transports at range. There's another kill, and the last transport is panicked, but still providing quite a bit of suppressive damage. And look at this, isn't that bold? Martijntje over here is just landing a couple of AS-532s, or at least he was planning to. He's now landing them slightly further to the rear of these battle lines. And so far, it seems that they have control over these zones here. So hopefully these helicopters can land safely and start resupplying and especially regrouping all of these very heavily wounded units. And so far, this is not the end of it. While they may have control, they are still taking napalm runs. Unfortunately, that wipes out one of the cargo helicopters there with most of the supplies. Also costing him quite a few KCT troopers there. On the the left flank, the Marines and the KCT are locking down this position for further engagements that Red might come up against. So this area is pretty much cut off. I would recommend putting another Vuurploeg over here if you can, for slightly more standoff fighting, but this will definitely keep them at bay. Now in the middle, Settlements is engaging the forces from Ripnorder at close range, and once again, Marines taking no prisoners whatsoever, and the forces from Ripnorder are very, very quickly getting killed off here. Now on the right, the defenses are alright. They can keep these guys at bay, but against tanks they're going to have an issue. Especially if these tanks manage to cross this bridge. They will see them coming, but that's about it. And at this point their primary priority should be dealing with these aircraft. as Red 4 is just constantly bombing these guys with either standard explosives or napalm. And you can see that they have pretty cleverly here either tried to bomb the Marines, napalm these guys, or cut off their area of retreat. Whichever it is, the Marines so far are not that impressed with it and are currently chewing their way through a whole host of Mehanichovana, as well as going through some of these transports. They were able to circumvent the flames here, and instead have taken a position in these buildings, keeping the Red infantry just at bay, as well as they can. Solomons is also bringing in a couple of further fire support units here, as we have a Leopard Verkenning, the recon tank, as well as a Leopard 2A1 being brought in to deal with units at slightly longer ranges. The cargo helo has been able to survive that bombing. This is the one that did survive. It has taken quite a beating though. As you can see, it's pretty damn blackened here. But at least it's airborne and taken on supplies from the FOB, getting ready to deliver further supplies to the front line here. And yet another Super Galeb comes in. No AA response whatsoever. But fortunately, no napalm strike actually hits Salomon's Korps Mariniers here. The other group of Marines, despite the fact that they are very heavily worried and panicked and wounded, are still fighting and keeping the Proletarian 90 at range. As the Vuurploegs, several of these guys actually, at the left side are using their Super Dragons to deal quite a bit of damage against the Proletariat, which have no choice. They either need to back down or walk right into the fire. And of course, Super Galebs, after being rearmed, come in again. And as the Vuurploeg gave away their position, they are now taking the brunt of the napalm fire. But so far, Red is actually not doing that bad. Yes, they may have a slightly less advantageous position on the terrain, but Blue is not getting any points. Red is at a steady +2, and of course now it becomes the issue of Blue getting to take over positions here as quickly as possible, and getting Echo, Golf and Foxtrot under their control. Now note how Golf was just ignored for the majority of the time, as it's not that important of a sector. It does not have any strategic value as opposed to Foxtrot. Foxtrot is basically the bridge to Gulf, and if you can keep control of Foxtrot and dedicate more forces there in the beginning, you can usually come back from it by capturing Foxtrot with command infantry and then putting a command unit into Gulf. Another airstrike comes in, and unfortunately they did wipe out one of the AA units here using a seed aircraft. The only AA that they have over here at the moment is the Stingers. Now against airplanes, these guys only have a range of 1820 meters. Their damage is only 5. Now the Super Galebs don't have that much ECM, but they're perfectly capable of staying at range and not actually getting into the range of the Stinger. So far, they're basically doing constant sorties, flying in, dropping napalm, ducking back out. Now Salomon seems to be trying to push up on the right flank with a couple of infantry units inside their 25s. Not really getting through, as they're getting taken out by both the rocket pods from the HT-40s as well as the Pedobranchi. The 25s try to come out, deal with the helicopters or with the Pedobranchi at longer range, taking quite a beating from these HT-40s. So far the armor seems to be taking it, but they're taking quite a bit of damage to their systems. Stabilization malfunction, firing computer reset, and at this point only the Stoottruppen over here are able to deal any damage of consequence to the Pedobranchi, right up until the point where yet another airstrike comes in, panics these guys, stuns them, and wipes out pretty much half the group there. Unfortunately that's not the only one, as we have further bombardments coming in, and the Stoottruppen survive with just 5 guys, where there used to be about 18, not less than, actually less than a minute ago. So far, they're holding on to this sector, but it is shaky. They are also, and I'm talking Blue for at the moment, able to capture Gulf. They're bringing in a command unit to go for Foxtrot, and if they can capture Echo as well, they're going to be sitting at their own +2. trying to get closer to that 202 points that Sparky and Ripnorder have so far been able to gather. On the right flank, we have a pretty decent defensive force. We have the KCT, the Stoottroepen that we saw the whole time there, the Leopard 2A1, Leopard Verkenning, and some autocannon transports to deal with any infantry that might survive. Yet another Super Galeb comes in. This time around it is getting quite close to the enemy here. The Stingers were able to take it out, but not before it was able to drop off its cargo. Another Super Galeb comes in with his second buddy and a J-22, all trying to keep these Marines at bay. And this is pretty much one of the few ways that Red 4 has to deal with these guys. Because at short range, infantry to infantry, they really don't have the capability of dealing with them. Suppressing them with mortars would help, but so far they haven't been able to... Well, actually they haven't needed them yet, because their air dominance was so damn good that they were just able to constantly drop napalm and standard HE explosives on top of them, and just keep them at bay that way. And so far it seems to be working. While infantry here is holding, they have taken significant losses, and Red has been able to at least clear this position temporarily, buying the Yekeri over here some time to get close. And hopefully they can get into the building here before the Stoottroepen do too much damage to them with their Super Dragons. The Super Dragons don't do that much damage, it's only 2 HE, but it does add up over time. And it's just a nice bit of standoff damage at a range where the Yekeri have absolutely no way of returning the favor to the Vuurploeg over there. Now it seems that the Red forces are starting to probe on the right here. The Salamandra flies over the Stoottroepen, wiping out most of them with the assistance from the Gamma over there. Actually, never mind, the Gamma does not have the capability to go after them. Wipes out the Stoottroepen. And at this point we have an unidentified, or at least we have a Salamandra on the loose here. We don't quite know where it is. They do have a BO-105 here on the right flank to guard against any incursions from helo pushes or potential infantry rushes coming in from the side. On the left they don't have anything here, but instead they were able to extend their front line quite a bit farther, using a BO-105 on the left far, as well as some UH-14s, which they may have forgotten about, as these guys are still carrying infantry. So Martijntje over here might be considering doing a push on the other side of the river, using a couple of Marines to go behind enemy lines. Yet more Red forces, or Red 4 infantry, has been able to make it across the river. I'm not quite sure how these guys were able to get here, but they are getting completely surrounded by fire from the Korps Mariniers, the Stoottroepen, and a further group of Korps Mariniers. But thanks to the fact that they're in this building here, never mind, they now decided to visit the Korps Mariniers in their same building, and are immediately paying the price for that, getting wiped out time and time again. Yekeri trying to push up. Unfortunately, seemingly a miscommunication went on there by Red, as they bombed their own forces. That was a bit of a friendly fire incident. Apache Escort manages to get a kill on one of the Yekeri groups there. And of course we have further airstrikes coming in from Ripnorder. One goes down, the Stingers reload, the aircraft flies over, drops its napalm, but that's the last thing it will ever do. Unfortunately, the Dutch over here are capable of keeping away from that napalm as best they can, but I suppose that the drivers over here and the infantry might be getting rather worried about the napalm that's getting so damn close. Seemingly survivors from transports that might have been destroyed here from Ripnorder are trying to hold on. Not doing so well, as yet more firepower from the Super Dragons comes in. It just keeps pecking away at these guys at 2 HE at a time, dealing increasingly damage and just keeping them at bay. Now an artillery strike tried to hit these guys, seemingly didn't do that much damage, although they may have been able to wipe out one Stinger. But so far I haven't seen that much damage go into these guys yet. You can be guaranteed that the DAFs are pretty much driving non-stop back and forth to the FOB to bring in fresh recruits, as well as more and more ammo for the Super Dragons and the Stingers. And hopefully, at this point, there will no longer be any aircraft, as they've been able to shoot down a lot of them so far. So instead, Red 4, mostly Ripnorder here, is trying to approach from a different angle, using a couple of M84As, going right up against the Leopard 2A1 that was patiently waiting for them there. The Gamma is trying to get a shot at the Leopard, but gets wiped out here by the Pip. And so far, the tanks are reconsidering their decision and falling back. Not that interested in trying to engage an entrenched position without good reconnaissance. Yes, the T-55 there is providing recon, but they just don't know enough about the situation here to make an adequate push. Instead, they were using the XA-180s with their amphibious capability to float across the river. Good play there. Unfortunately, the Dutch were waiting for them. The Marines are immediately wiping out the transports. Maybe there are survivors in there. I just cannot quite tell. But we do have 30 Commandosi coming in. And these guys are, of course, immediately getting greeted by the Super Dragons, quickly trying to make their way into either the tree line or the building here, as they are trying to avoid fire from the HE damage by the Vuurploeg. And I gotta say, these guys are doing great work. These and these. But they are starting to run out of ammo. You can see all of the DAFs are now empty, forced to return to base. They do have another quad stack there, so they should be able to resupply the Vuurploeg and make sure that the enemy infantry does not get a chance to push in. But the Marines over here have a whole lot of issues. They're running up against Commandosi, Proletary, and the Vidra are trying to suppress trying to suppress the Marines, as the survivors are quickly ducking into a different building here, making sure they're no longer susceptible to fire from the Vidra. Time for a Leopard, correction, an H-64TD coming in. This one with the Hellfires is quickly making work of these tanks, as they are not yet being covered by AA. You can see that's about to change as they have a Sava coming in. These guys have a range of 2,800 meters against helos, whereas the TD also has a range of 2,800, so it's forced to fall back. And the Leopard 2A1 is trying to deal damage to either the M84 or the AA. Despite a stabilization malfunction, was able to take out the M84, and so far it's going to be able to hopefully duck back into cover. And not quite soon enough, as a Super Galeb comes in and wipes out the 2A1. Now they still have the Leopard for Kenning over here, but that's the last tank that they have. So this one's going to have to keep the infantry and the tanks at bay with the support from the TD. But they don't actually have anything that's capable of dealing with a prolonged tank engagement. Now at this point, Martijntje was able to bring in reinforcements for Salomon here. Salomon still has the Marines, as well as the Vuurploeg. And Sparky, who might at this point have lost a ton of infantry, has decided to surrender and just leave the game. Now at this point I'm going to switch to neutral, because I want to see what Red has, and it's going to be interesting to see what Red is going to be doing later on. Unfortunately, it just doesn't pull through. Now the Marines are dealing with the Commandosi. Commandosi is still trying to keep them at bay. The Marines have taken a significant battering here and are already worried and panicked. But fortunately they have a fresh group of recruits, or fresh group of Marines standing by, so that Salomon's Marines are able to fall back, keep them at bay, and just regain their footing as the fresh Marines are able to deal with the Commandosi there. Now this is where it gets interesting. With Sparky gone, Ripnorder gets a whole lot of availability for his units. So he's spawning in a whole lot of Gammas, HN42M Gammas. And look at that. He's preparing a helo train here. So he's readying up for a helicopter assault into the sidelines of Blue, where they only have one cheetah. They have a Pip 2, another cheetah, but if they can avoid this one, then this one and the Pip are not really going to be able to do that much damage. And they might be able to make their way all the way here, where there is just one cheetah, two cheetahs defending this position. So they are aware of the threat that there might be a helicopter rush coming in at some point. Rip also gets more availability for his super galebs, so he's happily making use of that and trying to do further bombing runs on these positions. The question is why? Because at this point he does not have any units that he seems to be wanting to push with, so he's not able to be following up these pushes with his or these bombing runs with his own forces and then getting his own units across the river there. To make sure that Red does not use any further aircraft, we have a double patrol of MLUs. Very nice fighters. Very capable units at that. 40% ECM, price tag 160, 4 long-range AMRAAMs and 2 short-range AIM-9Ms. All very accurate. So if there are further aircraft coming in, then they will be spotting them. But that only works for airplanes, as they still don't know about all of these helos that are potentially flanking this position here. Now Solomons is flying around with an MLU, just as a standard air patrol, but the MLU's radar has not yet detected all of these helos here. Now at this point Martijntje and Solomons have together gained 272 points and are still ticking up with a +2. At this point they really don't have to push. If they can hold on to the terrain that they have, they're just going to win by default. So really the only hope that Rip still has over here is trying to push in with all of those helos, trying to flank around, potentially wipe out Juliet and maybe go on a killing spree with further kills against the Laro there. Maybe this one, and if he gets lucky the Laro there, which will neutralize all of the income from blue as well as the reinforcement zone. And at that point they will have a significant problem trying to regain their position here. Unfortunately, Rip is not moving fast enough with his helos. They are not particularly quick. Correction, they are particularly quick, they're just not really using that speed. 310 kilometers per hour. So they are able to get to the position quickly. They are just not able to fire at infantry, because they don't have an autocannon, and they are not really able to deal with enemy infantry using rocket pods either. The Hera does have that capability. It does come with a couple of rocket pods as well as an M2 Browning, but infantry is really still going to present a problem. So this is basically a Hail Mary push here. And actually there are a few units here that can do something against infantry, such as the Sokols, with their autocannons and their rocket pods. Now as you can see there's nothing going on in the middle, except for a smokescreen. The M60s PM are trying to put up a large smokescreen here. And judging by the units that he has over here, not so much to actually present a threat, but to create a diversion. And just look at the minimap here. This snail force of helicopters, this red trail on the right side of the map. Now, I'm not exactly sure what happens here, but he has 40 seconds left on the replay, whereas we have 15 minutes left, or 14 minutes left on the gameplay section there. And at this point, he just stops. This helicopter train just doesn't move any further. I'm not sure what was going on, so Rip, if you're watching this video, please explain why you were bringing all these helos and then not actually making the push. Because there's really no reason for him to suddenly surrender, whereas he could still execute this attack. And you can see that they have now been detected. The helos are all trying to rush in, dealing with some of these block 5s. But at this point, it just ends, and Rip surrenders. Now, kills for Martijntje, 1367 points versus 660 points in losses. Solomons did even better, 2177 points in kills versus 810 in losses. And together they gained a significant portion of conquest points, making it a major victory as both of these gentlemen surrender. So, the lesson here, do not mess with the Dutch. Now, of course, I may have been butchering the pronunciation for some of the units from the other nations that were in this replay, but at least I was able to pronounce the Dutch names, so don't give me shit for stuff like that anymore, as I invite you to try and record your own pronunciation of these Dutch units. Anyway, that's it for this replay. If you have a replay that you'd like me to share, be sure to send it in through the link in the description, and I'll happily look at it and see if it's video-worthy material. As for the rest, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more Wargame.